IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simplified, the show where we come together every week and put it out there, which is basically an excuse for all of us to hear ourselves talk. And
Wait, this goes out somewhere?
I just thought we would. Hey, man.
I thought you guys just like catching up at 7.
No. What happens in Zoom doesn't stay in Zoom.
Oh, no.
So
that's why I'm getting random mails from people asking when is that Sriket website going to go up?
my God, you
the
guys.
secret life of Sriket. Actually, we got lots of fan mail asking why the website.
Yeah, some people have also started hyperlinking to that. I just visit that hyperlink once a day just to assuage my own panicked fears that one day it will go live.
Sriket, some friendly marketing advice to someone who doesn't need it. Control the narrative, man. Buy the domain itself before.
Buy the domain.
Oh man!
Or we will crowdsource for it from these apparent people who listen to us.
Hey man, I was resigned to the fact of not making money from Simplified. I'm not going to spend money for it now.
Fair enough. Okay.
But so today we have all gathered together. First things first, the 4 hosts of Simplified are all at least one shot vaccinated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great news. Also acknowledging the privilege that we have, considering a lot of people are still struggling for the vaccine. But good if you have the option to get vaccinated. I mean, I know there is no vaccine hesitancy, unlike the West in India as much. But please get vaccinated the first chance you get. And so on that, Chuck, what topic do we have to take on today?
Yay. So I saw a Netflix documentary yesterday on a newly released one on a life at one of India's top engineering colleges, IIT Kharagpur. The name of the show is a very clever one, Alma Matters. Yeah. And so when I started watching it, I thought it was going to be one of those, expose types, a dark underbelly of IIT Kharagpur. See how much people are struggling to get through and all that. And actually, it was quite a nuanced, balanced sort of thing where they explore various themes that students go through, right from placements to hostel life to identity to gender imbalance at the IITs to, of course, suicides and things like that as well, all told through the eyes of students. And I think that's the beautiful part. There was no narration anywhere. So you are left to draw your own conclusions, really. It was very slice of life. It was very... it felt very real at many places. And I thought, hey, it'll be an interesting thing to talk about with the gang. Also, because during the process of watching that, I was supposed to do research for another episode that we were supposed to record today, which I didn't have time to do. And I knew that this is the perfect topic to talk about half an hour ago, because I was supposed to wake up at 6:30 to record this with you guys at 7. We record that early, yes. And the last time I sent a message to somebody saying, shit, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Sorry, I just woke up. Was, I guess, literally in college.
So I just want to say I haven't seen the documentary, but as someone who's read 5 Point Someone 15 years ago, I think...
this is something let's start with that. Actually, I think that's a fascinating... So, by the way, there is absolutely no structure to this. I have no idea where we'll end up going with this for the next half.
Yeah, it's not like people are listening or anything. It's okay.
We're just talking on Zoom.
Correct. We're just chatting on Zoom. What do you guys actually think of 5 Point Someone? I'm going to put it out there. It might be controversial and we might lose some of these alleged listeners. I thought it was a damn good book.
I loved it. I loved it.
I absolutely loved it. I don't think 5 Point, there's nothing wrong with it. I really like the book.
The only things wrong with 5 Point Someone were the books that followed it. If he stopped it over there, it would be a one-hit wonder like that other. Sriket, what is our favorite book of that one Indian software engineer who goes to the US and bargains?
The Inscrutable American. That is actually one of my all-time favorite books. It's
now imagine if that guy had followed up with some...
Anurag Mathur,
Yeah, imagine if he had followed with some nonsense. Chetan Bhagat's next book basically involved some call center employees trapped in a cave and giving a missed call to God or something. So
that book was so bad that the movie featured Salman Khan. That's correct.
But I liked 5 Point Someone.
When I read it, I liked it. But I don't know if I like it when I read it now. But yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it was pretty cool.
I just love the concept, right? 5 points someone itself, and I was reminded of it because during the documentary they referred to that it's like they have this sort of
hierarchy.
Yeah, I wanted to say internal caste system, but best not to say that. Use that particular phrase so too callously with respect to IIT Kharagpur right now. And they say, we 6-pointers are like this, and wo 8 wale. And it's like they have like these terms for themselves. So I just thought we'd talk about our college lives and see what we were like 20 years or so back.
But that entire thing is actually quite, I mean, you think about it this way, it's almost like it's an extension of the larger pyramid system, right? Like when you think about it, people from IIT are at the top of a larger food chain, right? Like there are people from IIT, then there is BITS and maybe some other colleges, and then afterwards every NIT, and then every other engineering college under that.
Yeah.
So there is that.
Saying it's a pyramid scheme.
Pretty much. that exists, and then I mean it's an extension of that, right? Like the IITians are very aware of their place in that hierarchy. So within IIT also, it's actually quite a natural extension to have a hierarchy within the bunch of people, and who's that king who's standing on top of the pile of bones.
Yeah,
it's too early for like profound observations. But one thing I wanted to say was, you remember in the like Meaning of Life episode, Viktor Frankl basically said when they were stripped of all identity and reduced to numbers. So it's pretty much the same in the Indian education system as well, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, to the point where yesterday, I mean, one of the most powerful scenes in the documentary were people reading during placement season, and there's so much of it just hit home. People in their rooms, they got a mail with who all were shortlisted for a particular company, and there weren't names; they were just numbers over there. So even though each number was an individual person, like 26, like who was number 26, and like they were thinking roll numbers. But while the show did have a lot of slice of life sort of things, but there were a lot of messages in there. Obviously, one of those messages which I thought was quite beautifully dealt with was how IT and data science has basically led to basically taking all the talent. Everybody wants to go and work over there. One, because they're the big names, and two, because they're the guys giving those kind of salaries. As a result of which, core engineering actually suffers because nobody really cares about the courses over there. And it's so sad to see the professors themselves acknowledging it. You have a professor of mining engineering, and he's like, I know kids are not going to pay attention during the class because their eyes are on Microsoft and Swiggy, Flipkart and things. And it's kind of, he said, what do I do? The market doesn't need what we have to offer anymore. And it's kind of sad to sort of see that happen. And there's a really beautiful scene in which, there are always some kids, at least in engineering colleges, where you have some students who are very keen on getting into what is called core engineering itself, which is a mechanical engineering, getting into actual mechanical engineering and so on for other streams. And there was a scene where there was this one guy, Mallu guy, in fact, who was so happy that he got into Bajaj, the actual core thing. And he's celebrating with everybody, all his bachelor, oh, you wanted core and you got it. So happy for you, man. And stuff like that. And I thought that is quite nice. So I just want to, all of us come from different backgrounds. And I think we should just let these listeners know that is where we are coming from and what background we are giving these answers from. So Chuck, I studied chemical engineering apparently from a fairly good college in Kerala back in 2002 to 2006. You guys?
Yeah. I did my mechanical engineering really, really long time back. Yeah. So 82 to 86.
2002 was also a long time back. So don't be shy.
Yeah, I studied in Manipal, which was an amazingly, surprisingly good college, considering that it was, it was what was known as a donation college back then. So people who didn't make, so I didn't get into the colleges I wanted. I wanted to get into the RECs, and
you are again skirting around the key statistic, Naren.
What?
Which year did you do this?
Yeah, 82 to 86. So I joined in 1982.
Not too bad. Wow. I was born bang in the middle of, I think all three of us, Tony, Shriketh, and
I was 87.
While you were.
Shriketh was born after you passed out.
Yes, I think Tony as well, right?
Yeah, 87.
Yeah, Tony as well, 87. Yeah.
Next, I will give my mother's maiden name. And the name of my first pet, so you can work out my password. But anyway, Naren, so basically we're talking about the donation college, which basically first asks the question, ask not what the nation can do for you, ask what you can do nation.
Beautiful. Tony and Shriketh, your background.
Very good.
Yeah, I actually made it to one of the first NITs, actually the first NIT ever established, NIT Warangal, but in metallurgical and materials engineering. So they actually had a nice sort of state-based system when they were regional engineering colleges. And when I joined, it had become a deemed university, but they were still following the structure of each state has a certain number of seats and stuff like that. Yeah, so interesting times. We'll get to it, I guess. Shriketh.
Yeah,
so the group.
The only non-engineer in the group.
You are here by quota basis, huh?
Pretty much. I fill the quota as such. Diversity quota. But I am the rare non-engineer, despite having been quite vociferously accused of looking exactly like one and must be an engineer some way. But I am really not. I am an arts graduate.
Andhra and you stay.
Yeah, I know.
I'm from Andhra. My father studied from REC Warangal and did his IISc Bangalore. So he's the core mechanical engineer as it gets. So, but so I did my Bachelor's of Arts in Literature, Psychology, and Mass Communication from Christ College, Bangalore, 2007 to 2010. And so that's my background. I proceeded to finish the way we all have with an MBA, but at my core, I am an arts graduate.
Oh,
proud.
Very good. Loud, proud.
Oh, that's the core placement.
So I want to.
I am the only one here who is living true. I did radio broadcasting in my undergraduation. Okay, I am the only one who is qualified to truly be here.
Well, this is work for you, no?
Then what? I am literally the only guy who's actually qualified to be here.
Amazing. So I want to talk about that core thing that I spoke about a while back. Naren, was it sort of like the same thing in when you were studying? Because I'm guessing all these IT companies had started around then.
Yeah. So in my time, computers weren't invented actually. I mean, they were. We had one computer. It was an 8-bit microcomputer which worked on an operating system called CP/M. And that was Microsoft DOS wasn't there that time. And when we were in the third year or something, we got two Microsoft PCs which worked on floppies, and that was DOS. So we did all. And nobody wanted to. So I remember.
But Naren, isn't this a good time to let people know that Satya Nadella was actually a junior in this same engineering?
Satya Nadella was 2 years junior, and he probably
if you were born 2 years later, probably you would have had better computers.
Those two DOS computers inspired him, I guess.
Yeah, inspired him. But I'll tell you one thing. So virtually everyone in my block, ended up in computer science. There were electrical engineers or mechanical engineers. There were civil engineers. All of them went to America. They did whatever. Many of them just, specialized in their core fields, and then went on to, because there were just simply so many jobs in that field at that time. And a lot of them became very wealthy because they happened to join companies that were giving out stock options, and which were small companies back then. Companies, there was one company called Juniper Networks, which it was a small company. It became a really, really big one. And many others. So one of my friends.
That's interesting, Naren. So I understand an IT company coming and recruiting a fresh engineering grad out of college, because you still have that induction program and like screw whatever you learned here are 2 months and then you'll become a coder, what's that sort of thing, which I guess works at a fresher level. But I'm surprised, like after getting 5-10 years of working in core and then moving over, is that worth it for the companies? Like that's
at that time, I think.
Or they just want enough people.
It was like one of those Cambrian explosions, right? So everything was just in different things. Computer science just took off, and they really needed people who were, who would be able to learn things on the fly and implement them. So engineers were probably the best bet because they had a slightly better ability with ideas.
Yeah, and they were literally working on the fly.
Yeah.
It's a bug, not a feature. It's a feature, not a bug. But Chuck, on that note, I would like to introduce you to this concept called MBA, which literally does what you asked, where people waste several years doing whatever, then join a company at some middle manager level
as well. Do you think core can be salvaged, Naren?
So a good question.
So because what you're saying, this happened when you were studying, this happened when I was studying, and ostensibly when Tony was studying as well. We did it around the same time, I guess. When did you graduate again, Tony?
2008.
2008. So 2 years after me then. And from this documentary, it seems to be the same thing right now, except now they've added in fancy things like analytics and data science and ML and stuff like that as well. Basically, some fancy new tech stealing quality core engineers away from their stream of study. Apart from money, can this possibly be salvaged, do you think?
So even now, there are enough people who go into core engineering for all kinds of mysterious reasons. Logically, there is really no reason why anyone should go in. Like my younger son studied electronics engineering, and he said he didn't like to be in computer science. He didn't like coding. He just didn't like. He had an aversion to sitting in front of a screen all day. He didn't like that. One of my nephews, he did mechanical engineering, because he absolutely hated coding of all kinds. So he just hated. So I know kids, who really don't like computer science. It's partly a reaction to what they perceive as computer science, so the career, and partly a reaction to the content. So they don't like coding. They don't like the way, computer science and sort of being a computer engineer does involve sitting in front of a screen all day. And
I like how wide the spectrum is, right? You don't like computer, so like it still has to be engineering. Like there is nothing outside of engineering. What else is there? Like, so I'll pick a core branch. No, but actually, I think, it's also a function of these placements and numbers and stuff like that as well, right? Unless like see, the thing is, at a graduate level, if you are really into that field, it probably makes sense for you to, do an MS or go abroad and study further and, actually get into the field in deep. But otherwise, pretty much it's chalk and cheese, right? Like I remember the offering for the software companies being at least 3 times what core offered. And then you get to stay in a city like Bangalore as opposed to being in Pina or somewhere on the outskirts of wherever.
Exactly.
Right? So.
And the other part, which coming back to Chuck's question, and Naren, as you mentioned, most of your peers ended up in computer science. You still are pretty much true to what you studied in your, your stream of work is still true to that core. So did you stay with core as a matter of accident, or was that a deliberate choice, and or was that some other consideration that came into play there?
So I went back to core after I did my MBA, right? So I did my MBA. I was horrified to see so much bullshit. It is just it is stupid, okay? It is just insane. I do not think it's a branch of knowledge. You should not dignify it with a degree. It is not education. Okay, people who do business, they learn nothing in an MBA college. They do nothing. They just do not learn anything. And so okay, I'm hearing MBA listeners just unsubscribing from
Simple. Hey, you're underplaying the importance of networking.
Yeah, but that's about the only thing, networking, and that's abhorrent to me, right? So when you want to do something sincerely, you have to select the best person for the job, not a person who's your cousin or who's from the same college that you are or who speaks the same language or whatever. Networking is absolutely, it goes against everything that we say we stand for. And yet all engineering college and MBA college, everyone, they shamelessly indulge in networking. You have
but I mean, it's networking. I mean, I know I'm also not a great fan of networking, but the fact that this show is running a testament to how we networked over the internet several years ago, right?
That's like different. It's not because we are from the same college, right? So you
it's about
you and I became friends because of crosswords, for example.
Yeah.
Chuck and I became friends because of silly jokes. And same with, all of us became friends because of silly jokes and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, really? I thought we all became friends because we all were a fraternity of MBA.
So Naren, my basic point is, till you finish your schooling, it's at random, right? You're thrown in with a bunch of different people because it's a law that you have to probably go to school. But once you get into your first college, it's automatically like a self-selected group of people of similar privilege / ability / context, right? So it makes it and probably, hopefully, you find yourself away from home for the first time and you have to sort of make new friendships and stuff like that. So there is a reason why those can endure, because you spend a fair bit of time with those people and have a new family kind of, or a new life kind of perspective to begin with.
Yeah, independence was the first time, actually. And actually, that's one of the things that I wanted to, that's one of the next themes that I want to talk about over here. Many of the kids who are coming for this, they were finding freedom for the first time, as in freedom to make their own choices, even if it's freedom to have an option of what to eat, for example, something as simple as that. It's very clear many of these kids had just been under their parents' wing or watchful eye, and then coaching center after that, because face it, we are talking about the IITs over here. And then of course, IITs present their own set of problems, right? One of the things the documentary does pretty well is highlight the gender imbalance within the IITs itself. In Kharagpur, it's 9-1. I think it's slightly better in MBA colleges, and at least I studied at MICA, which prides itself on a good gender balance. In fact, I think it was pretty much 50-50, and I'm guessing the case was same for you, Sriket.
I had... in my class, during my Bachelor's of Arts, I had 70 girls and 19 boys.
Wow.
So there you go. The gender balance the other way.
That said, I would like to say, when I was in MBA school, all the girls were really, really better managerial material than the guys.
For sure.
Definitely better managerial material than the engineers, because it has that huge human, dimension, which somehow, women tend to be. They tend to get along far better there. They're not confrontational as guys.
I disagree with you. Okay, sorry. I was just confronting. Sorry.
Naren, I love what you said over there. The women were better managers than the engineers. That there's so much that's unsaid within that.
So I have a story. Basically, when obviously in engineering it was way too outnumbered, right? And I think that's a really cruel thing to do to actually boys who turn into men.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of your worldview is formed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The misogyny creeps in. You don't know how to interact with the half of the world, right? So it's a really cruel thing to do. Sorry, Sriket, you were saying.
Absolutely agree, because the one factor that happened, and I can see that as an extension going into place like the IITs or any engineering colleges. So I went to a boys' school when during my schooling, and the contrast that I had was in my building while growing up. All my neighbors' kids, all the kids I used to play with, all were girls. And plus, I had an elder sister at home. So I had a female presence in my home, but I used to go to a boys' school. So there was a balance in some way. But there were other kids who used to come to my place to play or something like that. There was this guy who turned up and he had no female cousins, no siblings. So when he turned up and my neighbor girl came and said hi to me while he was around, he was just like flabbergasted that I was talking to a girl. And he had never spoken to a girl in his life. And this was when we were in like the 11th grade or something. So we were about 15, 16, and he had still never spoken to a girl ever. And I can almost imagine a person like this. And this is pretty normal, getting into an IIT or an engineering college with this ridiculous gender balance. So there are people who are getting out into the world at the age of 21, 22 without ever having a real conversation with a woman.
Yeah.
And that factor really messes with your mind because you don't see them as human beings.
Yeah.
You see them as either sexual objects or people to be feared.
Yeah.
And you've done very good engineering studies, Riket, I must say, for someone who's not been.
No, because I encountered these people. Like I saw the contrast from the other side, having been in a very women-dominated environment through my arts college. And we also had students in the science stream in the same building. And their classes used to be entirely male-dominated. So I know how they used to be like awkward fellows sitting over there, like gawking at girls in the building. Similarly, during my MBA, where we had Symbiosis Institute of Telecom Management in the same campus. And there used to be like this whole thing about SITM boys who used to sit in a large line waiting for the SIMC girls to come back and like just gawk at them. Wow. Because this was like, it was creepy for the girls, but for the guys, it was like seeing something they have never seen before.
So right? For them, it was more about the exoticness. So it was more zoo than lust.
More zoo. Yeah. I mean, it eventually transforms itself in more zoo than lust. That's fair. But it was definitely a factor of trying to explore the exotic in some way. Now that may take on different ways. And obviously, they don't understand what makes women uncomfortable and stuff like that. But it begins from there, right? It begins from just a curiosity of something you're denied your entire life.
Yeah, I think that brings us to one point that we wanted to briefly touch upon, which is like the privilege that is seen and unseen, right? So obviously, if you think about how engineering colleges have such a bad gender imbalance, whereas in the, let's say, board exams, usually like girls do better than boys, right, on average. And to me, it's purely a function of two things. One is access to centers that game the entrance system. Second is the entrance system itself, right? So when I went to, basically, if you grew up in Kerala during the time that I did, there was one prominent place where you went to, which was called PC Thomas.
Oh God.
Which is like one quota factory kind of thing in Thrissur. But basically, to get there, you had to either like take trains or stay late nights and stuff like that. And by the way society is structured, it automatically meant that even in those coaching centers or institutes, you would have like that gender imbalance present, right?
Exactly.
So you just cut off access by, it's systemic.
It's systemic as well as cultural discouragement of women in STEM.
Yeah, but that's also true. I think it used to be true of even IIMs to a degree, right? So it's not just STEM. It's just that the way the tests are structured and the way the system is, it automatically sort of, and that I would say the test itself has a problem, which is why like in 2012, when I joined IIM Kozhikode, they actually took a very progressive kind of decision to say, we need to bring in diversity. If the test is not doing it, then we need to do it ourselves, right? And
I remember this.
Yeah, and that actually caught on very well because people realized
how did they do it?
Well, they didn't only look at the test scores, right? So they basically...
okay, that was great. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I mean, they had sort of like a target number in mind saying at least 30% of the batch needs to be women. I think that has gone up significantly across IIMs. And when companies actually hired women, they saw that there's actually a lot of different perspective that can come in, right? One quick thing I want to mention is when we were in B school and we were all watching, a bunch of friends were watching like Kill Bill together. And suddenly there's a very gory scene. And suddenly from one corner of the room, we hear like, someone asking, that's a very nice skirt, no? And like if you remember that there's a Japanese girl in it, she's wearing a very nice, pretty skirt, which like none of the boys saw, right? But it's a new perspective that you bring to a scene. And I think
absolutely
across the board, it's been proven that diversity brings better perspectives and better decisions, right?
Yeah. So I've been on the interview panel for my alma mater for the last few years, and one of the things that I absolutely love about how they go about doing this is they don't do a selection. They don't say, okay, do they fit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 criteria? They always look for diversity, and the way they do it is, okay, what's the new perspective that this person is potentially going to add to the classroom? And we always look at it from that perspective. So we have had some candidates who might be fumbling in English and might not be your standard interview candidate in that sense, who doesn't typically cross MBA interviews or any interview for that matter. But then we always look at it from the presence of this person in that classroom will be great for everybody else in the classroom. So very often we have actually taken students or candidates from that perspective. So I guess a lot of this also does rest with the institute. I guess it's easier to do when you have when you're dealing with a relatively small number in B schools, which is 200 or so, rather than the 12,000 that an average that say an IIT Kharagpur deals with.
But that's also easier to do when your panel is diversified, right? Which always necessarily doesn't happen, which is the other side of the privilege that we don't see and don't speak about is basically other communities and
which I think we should address.
But then that there was on the whole communities bit, like I remember this during my MBA especially, where there was reservations for certain communities of people to come into the batch and stuff like that. So while the reservations were there were a couple of factors that really disadvantaged people post reservation as well, where one was about how despite the fact that these students were part of the batch, right? We had one batch of people doing their MBA, and these students were part of the batch. In multiple places, right? Like when they were, when we had initial attendance rolls put up, and when there were any marks rolls put up and stuff like that, like students who were either Kashmiri migrants or people who were from a certain country, they were in public attendance rolls on notice boards. They were marked as separately.
Wow.
Like they were put there, like some guy's name bracket KM, which is Kashmiri migrant, right? And that kind of discrimination, what that did was, I mean, these are kids who are grown and everyone understands what it means. That one kid, I still remember they used to refer to that guy as this guy Kashmiri migrant, right? And that became the tag for that guy eventually, obviously. And what it also did was it came out in classes and stuff where there were certain people who were brought in because of either SC/ST reservations of some sort, and they clearly qualified on their merit of performance in their own mediums, but they were switching from their local language medium to an English medium during the MBA. There were no classes that enabled them to catch up in any way, like English aid classes or any kind of classes. They were literally just dumped into the class. And there were quite a few students who quite a few teachers who used to make it a point to pick on these students because of their poor English, right? That, oh, how are you doing your MBA if you can't speak like this? And that became like an additional, I never obviously personally experienced any of this, but when I used to see this and now that I reflect back upon it, they must have had a hellish time during their MBA because they're literally working in a language. They're trying to struggle with a language where everyone else is trying to work on the content of what they're studying.
So and that in itself is a point, right? That English is actually not like a marker of intelligence; it's just a marker of your class. And
exactly.
If you speak English well, it means you've been extremely privileged more than the rest in the country, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I saw this gap even when I switched schools when I was in school. So I went to a convent school till my 10th grade. And after that, I switched to a local school in Ahmedabad. And in there, because in the convent school, from a very young age, we were all mandated to speak in English. So students used to speak in English amongst each other, speak in English at home. So English became a comfortable medium for communication for all of us. Versus in that school, you used to not speak English outside of an English class, right? In English class, where the teacher used to mandate you to speak in English, even we used to be taught mathematics in Hindi. So because the prof was more comfortable speaking Hindi, and we used to be taught mathematics in Hindi. So when we were doing all of these things, I could see that even non-English medium schools were struggling with this.
Yeah.
But I mean, we were studying English medium, but non-like English majority convent schools. So English is just restricted to a small tip of the pyramid of privilege. And that is used as a cudgel to almost like establish your superiority over other people.
This is the kind of conversation, honestly, that if we have like a few pitchers of beer between us, we could spend the night talking about. And it's only 8 in the AM right now. So last question then, guys, on this, which is not really related to the show I saw, which is, I always think that is the stuff that you learn outside classrooms that, is more important, especially in a formative course like engineering. When you get into an MBA, you still have some sense of what you are in your head. So for you, what was the most sort of like the few, like, I want to say takeaways that you actually learned in engineering? We always go to MBA, B school interviews and we faff like, oh, I learned analytical skills when I was in engineering. There's a joke, right? Analytical skills for engineering and networking for MBAs. I don't think anyone actually knows what these things are. For me, I think the answers might end up being slightly philosophical as well, because I think for me, it was, I kind of figured out who I was, what I wanted to do, what my interests really were. And I guess the answers might be kind of similar for you guys.
Yeah, wait, what was your learning?
I don't know. I just figured out a little more about who I actually was and what I wanted to do. I mean, when I came into engineering college, even though I didn't have a very restrictive childhood in that sense, worldview was extremely narrow. And I think for the first time, I actually got exposed to people from, say, different backgrounds. So people who have a different point of view and, some people who actually challenge the system. My roommate, I remember at that time, my first ever roommate in my engineering college, and I had a fairly sheltered childhood, not a cocooned, but a fairly sheltered childhood growing up in the Gulf. My first roommate used to sell drugs in Kerala.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
As in, like,
he used to. He's a very nice guy. He's not like he's one of those gun-toting guys or something.
He sold you drugs, so he must have been nice.
Yeah, he said drugs or weed?
Yeah, he used to say things like, "I made some money by carrying drugs from this part of Kerala to that one." So, and he was very quite chill about. He was quite chill about it. He was a very nice guy. But but so to me, like, wow, okay, so. One, people like this exist, and two, that's not really what I thought the average, drug dealer would be like, because pop culture paints a certain image of them. Then you realize, hey, these are just guys hustling in their own way, reacting to what another market sort of demands. And at the same time, I also realized that people who are, the so-called much wanted toppers, that they weren't actually the kind of, like, at the end of it, I would have actually rather hung out with the guy who was a drug dealer rather than some of the guys who used to get an all India or all Kerala rank of 50 or 100, because some of them turned out to be either extremely bookish to a fault, or they just turned out to be twats, which were some of the other roommates that I had. I think those 4 years in college, I don't remember a damn thing about chemical engineering, except of course the Helmholtz-Zelensky reaction, which all of us should have tattooed on our hands. But yeah, I think it just opened up the world to me in terms of what different people are, what all people can do. And I had a good set of friends while I was over there, because the college was a particularly interesting one. It wasn't a very nationally aware college, but at the same time, it was one of the best in Kerala. So you had a good set of people like who would listen to a show like this, one of those alleged people, I guess, who would listen to a show like this. At the same time, you also had some people from very, very background, so from very, very backward classes, and you could see how they were struggling to come up. And to add to one of your points, their struggle was more with the language than with the subject matter itself, which again was very, very sad and very eye-opening for me as a convent educated, privileged background student to see. So yeah, that's my sort of thing. Those 4 years were pretty valuable for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, it's. I think in the US, they have a system where you can be undeclared after you go into a university or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's high time they did that, right? Because it's ridiculous that, when you're I don't know, 15, 16, that you know what you want to do with the rest of your life, and to even pretend that that is the field that you should be in for the rest of your life, while I am still trying to figure out what life is about while I'm close to 35. So I mean,
56, I think I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be.
There you go. I think it's a ridiculous construct to put people under, and lots of pressure, right? And I think one of the things that I saw was usually the people who ended up in such a college, in NIT Warangal, for instance, were people who were like toppers in their school and stuff like that all throughout. Suddenly they find out that they are not, all they were chalked out to be, right? Because you suddenly fall in the like bottom half of the class, and that's something that's never happened to you ever. So how people struggle and cope with that is also important, I think. Yeah.
Tony, I'm just a very quick question on that. I'm assuming that for you, you saw this more starkly when you were at IIM, when you have even more of the creme de la creme, as it were.
Oh yeah. I think. I mean, it's not creme de la creme I don't know how to define creme de la creme, right? So, I mean, they were all very like smart, intelligent people, but it depended on in B school. I think it was much easier to sort of not care about your grades if you didn't want to, because practically in 1 year you had like 24 papers, and the grade point didn't show up in your CV unless you were in the top 5% or something like that. So, but yeah, it was definitely there, right? And it depends on how much pressure you put on yourself. But after engineering and maybe a couple of years of work ex, you probably, at least I didn't care so much about it.
I have one other thing. I missed out a substantial part of the discussion, so I don't know if this has been covered. But I have this pet theory that we are shaped more by our negative experiences than our positive ones, right? So if you've really had a bad experience, you've had something, it makes you a different person. It changes you as a person. It's more likely to change you as a person than something. So when you're in engineering college, okay, so I've seen this in several engineering. A lot of my friends are engineers in different colleges. They've had a lot of. So one of the negative experiences, so when you come into engineering, you come from a pretty sheltered background. So everyone has been pretty nice to you. And then you find a whole bunch of people, many of whom are extremely weird and downright nasty. Okay. So it affects different people different ways. So some people become wary of interaction. Some people become devious and manipulative. Some people
get attracted to that.
Yeah, get attracted to that. It's pretty defining. That 4 years of engineering is far more defining than the 2 years of MBA. I mean, for all the vituperation I heap on MBA as a thing, it was a pretty gentle course. And so though I personally think it is all faff and all, it is for 2 years, you do a hell of a lot of reading and a lot of discussion. So it sort of gives you a good idea of what kind of situations you might face in the real world when you're in a managerial position where everything is undefined. So in engineering, a lot of things are defined. So if a crankshaft is broken, you know that you have to make a new crankshaft or buy a new one. But here you don't know. I mean, that Maggie thing happened. All of a sudden, Baba Ramdev found mercury or arsenic or whatever in that. And, what do you do, right?
But Naren, in the managerial thing, there is one thing that is defined, which is how a case study starts. You famously
Mr. Gupta was worried. I found that the most ridiculous. The case study method was an absolute ridiculous thing.
Yeah, we should talk about case study method in a subsequent episode that we do on MBA life, probably. But yes, so Shriketh, any final words?
Yeah, well, I mean, I clearly did not have an engineering experience.
It's okay.
But overall, from my college undergraduate experience, I mean, I've, as at least you guys will know, I had a fairly colorful schooling experience before that. And for me,
it's all queuing up to the secret life of Shriketh.
For me, college was in some ways redemption, because I was literally in the wilderness previously before this, having performed really badly in my schooling. So also the college I went to was this college where a lot of fairly privileged rich kids went to party, right? In some ways, because it was a really posh college in Bangalore. But for me, it was just a great I mean, it was the biggest opportunity to finally learn again as part of the mainstream. So for me, it was, I felt really like I actually understood and recognized and enjoyed that privilege to be able to do that again. So that's why I kind of like really applied myself there. And also just the ability to kind of get into the depth of something that I was really denied from studying, because I was entirely forced to do engineering or sciences for my entire schooling. So being able to like study literature was a very liberating thing. So I assume a lot of people who ended up doing engineering would have really enjoyed the arts. And like Tony said, I mean, 100%. Had they had the choice to be able to kind of take the opportunity to be unattached for the initial semesters, may very well have enjoyed doing that. So yeah, I mean, that's the only part I can say where I thoroughly enjoyed that experience.
To sum up, I mean, I just taking that point and something Naren put together and just ended this way. Feel like education in that sense should like completely be reversed. You should start your life out with an MBA, basically like exposed to like everything and just faff around for a few years and learn all the soft skills while you're.
No, you really need to learn like stuff like financial management.
How to
make a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, you start that, and then 2 years you figure out what you want to do, and then you do like a specialization in that. So that becomes your engineering or arts or whatever. So at least you go and find what you like, and then you come back and learn even more vital skills like like things that you will appreciate at a later point of time, like history or civics and things like that, which we could all use a little more of, or PE, which we could all use a little more of. So I think everything should
this is the best piece of engineering that you've done. This is the best piece of engineering.
So the takeaway from this we have is that right after kindergarten, people should do their MBAs, and we should.
This is not a ploy to get more simplified listeners.
All right, so that's about it. This little discussion on. I'm not quite sure what this discussion was about, but I had a veil of.
That was a great thing. Like you said, I
would have loved to hang out for a college.
Hey man, you wouldn't have lasted in arts, okay?
I wouldn't have lasted in arts. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't know my Dostoevsky from my...
But imagine like studying with Naren, right? It'd be extremely frustrating. Fellow would just like play around and like bowl like breaks all day and then come and top the exams while you were...
Yeah, imagine asking him an engineering question and he starts quoting Jeeves.
Oh, we had guys like that as well. All right, guys. See you during our next Zoom session.
Yes. Naren, do you want to sum us up?
Yeah, stay safe, stay unengineered, and stay simplified.
You've been paying that one.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Cred, PayPal, and Siet. Thank you. We really do appreciate the support. So this week on Cyrus Says was great. We had Meghna joining us on Cock and Bull, Tanveer Taj and Priyanka Jena talking about pets. Huma Qureshi talks about her new television show and her life in Bollywood. And to celebrate 700 episodes on Cyrus Says, we had a number of his previous producers come on board and reminisce. Tune into This Round Is On Me, where Gauri Devidayal was joined by Samir Sheth and Yash Panage. These are the guys who started Bombay Canteen, O Pedro, and a number of other restaurants. Really great conversation they had with Gauri. On The Habit Coach, Ashton Doctor tells us about nourishing creativity and the importance of losing and some micro habits to counter overthinking. On their 75th episode, Ritasha and Rayushi talk to Naveen Richards. On The Note with Monica Nayat, she speaks with Komal Nahata to talk about the business of Bollywood, lockdown losses, piracy issues, and experiments being done to keep it going. On Advertising is Dead, Varun is joined by Guru Bhatt, VP of Customer Success Platform for PayPal India, to talk about how the digital money landscape and the fintech ecosystem has fundamentally altered the world. We also have Thalarate, our Kannada podcast, hosts Ganesh and Pawan discuss video games, and Sivakamyam Sabatam, the Tamil show where Kavita Jiva sheds light in another story about the bravery and excellence in the governance of the Pallava dynasty. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Namaskar, dear friends. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. Life, as you know, is a journey. And you and I, travelers, how can we celebrate this travel? I have a podcast for you. Begin the journey. I share stories and moments from my life. Do tune in every Monday and Thursday to listen to my podcast on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from. Cheers.